I'm your host, Madeline,
I am your co-host, David.
and today we're doing a topic that's been really requested.
Should we do the thing where we say the name of the podcast that we are?
Oh, probably.
Welcome to Pick Me Up, I'm Scared, everybody.
Yeah, we got to get a new theme song.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to make Bobby make one for us.
You know, I want them to go back to their hardcore roots.
Just do a hardcore intro song?
Yeah, I want a Boston beatdown breakdown.
You know what? I'll ask.
I feel like that could be cool.
Yeah, we'll see what we can make happen. But in the meantime, yes, you are on the podcast Pick Me Up, I'm Scared, and we are doing today an episode that has been so heavily requested for so many years.
Mm-hmm.
And the topic is Yugoslavia.
Yes.
And I'm Tito-pilled. I'm just gonna come out and say it.
Tito seems like a hella swell guy.
He seems great.
He seems great.
Have you read Tito on Trotsky?
No, I have not.
Tito on Trotsky goes hard.
Really? What's it say?
Oh, you know what? Let me pull it up for us. Let me give you a little... Tito has a piece called Trotskyism and Its Helpers.
Mm-hmm.
You've never seen a man hate Trotsky so much as Tito.
I mean, that makes sense.
He says, Trotskyism operates in different shapes, but always with one goal: to clear the road for the fascist imperialist bandits. And then the whole piece, he's just like, in the USSR, the Trotskyist bandits and their disciples acted for the defeat of the USSR, the destruction of a country of socialism. In China, the Trotskyists performed espionage services at the Japanese headquarters. In Spain, the Trotskyists were the soul of the fifth column. They caused mutinies in the rear of the Republican People's Army whenever Franco faced dangers on the front. And nowadays, lastly, when the generals Jose Miaja, Casado, and others were preparing treasonable surrender of the Republican Spain to the butcher Franco, the Trotskyists were the first to have helped that surrender and have targeted the communists who resisted that treason. They were operating as devoted servants of Franco, Mussolini, and Hitler. They have helped the enslavement of the Spanish people. And I'm like...
I mean, I think that's just accurate.
That's accurate.
Right. Like,
he's laying it out. He's like, fuck you, fuck that, fuck this.
I mean, my understanding of what happens to Trotskyism, right, is that they hate Stalin so much that it's like they forget that the main hate is capitalism.
Yes, they get Stalin derangement syndrome.
Yeah.
Like how your liberal aunt gets Trump derangement syndrome, and then next thing you know, she's like, maybe we need a liberal fascist takeover. You know, not your aunt, but one's aunt.
Yeah, my aunt
your
cool.
aunt. Yeah, your aunt seems fine.
She's great.
Like a general aunt, an archetype of a liberal aunt. You looked confused. David looked at me like, my aunt wouldn't do that.
Yeah, you're Tito-pilled. I'm Trisha.
Yeah, no, justice for Trisha. I didn't mean to drag her into this. Okay, apologies to Trisha. You would never. But yeah, no, I'm like, damn, this whole piece is him just going off about. No,
I mean, I think it's like an accurate representation of what happened. It's like what happens when communist infighting just becomes like, we're going to hang out with the capitalists.
Right. And look at this line. There can be successful struggle against Trotskyism, which is a form of fascism.
Yeah.
He's just saying it is a form of fascism. Only if every party member every time knows how to notice every phenomenon that leads to Trotskyism. And I got to say, I've talked to some Trotskyists. And I'm always like, we're reading the same text.
Yeah.
You're inventing what it means.
Yeah.
How are you doing this? And then I reached the opinion, I was like, what if they're a cult?
No, I mean, that's right. Okay, here's the thing. We were actually talking about this before we started recording, that most programs or groups that call themselves socialist or communist or whatever in the West do eventually resolve themselves into some form of cult.
I wouldn't say most, but I'd say too many.
A lot.
Right. Way too many for comfort.
Remember, LaRouche had his Trotsky moment.
Oh, I remember.
Right.
And then they were FBI informant. There's the Bob Vakey thing. Don't get me started on that.
I introduced you to the concept of Black Hammer.
I'd never heard of this one before.
Which they were doing white reparation Twitch streaming.
I do think that is funny, actually.
It is.
I kind of support that.
Very fun.
That is funny, yeah. But yeah, no, it's wild. So yeah, so I'm pretty Tito-pilled going into this, and everybody should know that. You should know that going into this. I will
say he broke with Stalin.
You know, everybody, China broke with Stalin. Whatever. It's not ideal.
I will say this is because I've been reading a lot of Jameson lately. And Jameson makes the point that there were certain like, I can't speak to how this like manifests itself in terms of Soviet policy when Stalin was in charge, or I don't know how you want to put it, because you have a
The captain.
when he was the captain of the ship. There we go. I know you get all
Well, he was the leader.
yeah, but
That's
he wasn't the dictator.
he
Yeah,
wasn't.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
but
There's no
right,
such thing as Stalinism. Blah blah blah. That's a psyop.
there like Jameson makes the point that like under Stalin there's this very like what he called billiard ball notion of the relationship between base and superstructure, where it's like we do the base and then the superstructure just changes automatically, right? Like and Jameson uses the metaphor of the relationship of base to superstructure as more like a track and rolling stock, i.e. more like a train on a track.
Well, this is interesting because it's making me consider like how this ties into the idea that like your reality is dictated by your material conditions.
Yeah, but I mean, right, like those what does Hall say? It's in the last instance. That means that there is a relative independence of superstructure, even if in the last instance it is determined by base. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Right. And so the metaphor of rolling stock on track, where there is a relative independence that is still defined by base,
Yeah.
I think is an accurate or an apt metaphor.
I haven't thought about it enough to have an opinion, but I'm thinking now. I'm cooking on it.
Okay.
Interesting.
We're just going to have 5 full minutes of silence.
Dead silence while I contemplate.
Yeah.
Now, I'm inclined to give it to you because it's not something I've considered before, and you have considered.
Well, I mean, I after that I went and read because I was like,
and I want to know like what about Stalin in particular?
Well, no, there is one. I think it's an address to like the Linguistic Society or some shit that he because I was like looking for things and I was like, I don't want to wade through like every address he gave to everything. So you went
for the Linguistic Society.
Well, because like right, the one question he says something where he's like, is language a part of the superstructure? Madeline, do you want to offer a guess?
I would say yes.
Stalin says no.
Oh, interesting.
And Stalin
I'm breaking with Stalin. This is the great Madeline Pendleton Stalin split of 2026.
But like, let's use that as like a synecdoche for like Stalin's whole deal, which is like, no, I mean, like the language is a relatively neutral thing that can just exist with a.
I understand the implications of this.
Yes.
The implications of this for all the Stalin haters are like Stalin wants to kill your culture. He doesn't care about you.
Well, he's not talking about like, I mean, he sort of gets into specific like national languages or whatever. But it's more like, are the habits of thought that are formed by your think like your Saussure kind of like old linguistic shit.
Yeah.
He's going to reject this like Saussure style of thinking about the ways in which language forms meaning.
Right. That's interesting though. Very, very, very boring. A little bit, I think.
Are you telling me I'm boring?
I'm not saying you're boring.
I'm
just saying, as far as the debate goes,
I think that debate has like big ramifications for how we're gonna.
What do you think the ramification of that?
Right, because like anyone who like thinks about like the poetics of the superstructure, like who wants to dwell on like ideological or superstructural moments, should probably have at least some kind of well thought out line on what that entails.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's not boring.
I mean, so this is what makes up the work of people like Benjamin.
You see, this is why I don't like,
because it's boring to you.
It's a little boring.
I think some of the most interesting.
First of all, nothing explodes.
Yeah, I mean, this is where you get to talk about movies.
I only care about the movie if something explodes. Right?
Yeah.
So you're not a lot of it, even metaphorical explosions in a text like that.
I don't know, some of the better writing, like if you're going to read Marxists or whatever, it tends to be the better writing.
Oh, that I will believe. That what I will believe. Okay, well, we're not going to be talking about if language is part of the superstructure today, or I guess we will be talking about it. I guess we will be talking about the relationship between base and superstructure in many passive and unintentional ways. But that's not.
So, but what we're talking about is the Balkans.
We're talking about Yugoslavia.
Writ large.
Yeah, we're talking about Yugoslavia.
Which includes most of the Balkans.
Yes, we're talking about balkanization. We're talking about the history of Yugoslavia. Yes.
Okay.
And I think it's going to be good. And I didn't even start that early, which if you want the early version, that I did not start at, there is a book that's available on archive.org that I do recommend for everybody out there. I might read a little bit of it on our bonus episode on Patreon, but it is called 20th Century Yugoslavia, and it is by Frederick Bernard Singleton.
Okay.
He does a huge, boring history of Yugoslavia before World War I, the area that would become Yugoslavia. There are maybe some grain production tables in there. There's definitely rainfall production, or rainfall tables.
I know you love a table.
I do like a table. So there's a lot of data. It's a data-heavy book. So I recommend that for the real nerds in the room.
Okay.
Okay. But I skipped it because I was very self-conscious about you telling me I always start every episode
Well, no, and I do it too. I just...
You do it too.
We both do it.
We both do this.
But I think in terms of sort of narrative structure, this is something we should at the very least be conscious of, because unless we want to start every episode with since time immemorial...
I'm not opposed to that. But I did make an effort this
We just changed the name of the podcast.
yeah, that's what we should do. I look, this one, I wrote down World War I, and then I was like, we don't need it.
Okay, so here's what
So yes, I asked David before. I was like, why don't you just give a little recap of World War I so everybody knows what we're coming into to start the episode, but we don't do a whole thing.
Okay, so
get ready, everybody. The episode's starting now.
The worst band in history.
The Red Hot Chili Peppers.
We've already done this.
The Red Hot Chili Peppers.
No, Franz Ferdinand.
Oh my God, that's right. We did this in they're not the worst band in history. This is why I was confused.
They are a decidedly mediocre band.
They're fine.
Whatever. So Franz Ferdinand gets shot. He gets shot by a Serbian Yugoslav nationalist, who at the time is like aggressively against Austro-Hungary's expansion into Yugoslavia, or its dictating of the policies in what Yugoslavia doesn't exist.
It does not exist
in
1919.
Bosnia and Herzegovina. Right. And the idea is that reforms within the Austro-Hungary Empire, which would affect Bosnia-Herzegovina, might mitigate against the desire of Slav people in the region that will become Yugoslavia to advocate for their independence and for their national existence.
Yes.
Okay.
So World War I ends.
Yes.
What happens of significance here?
Madeline, I do this to you all the time.
I know.
Give me a goddamn.
It's just, everything has to be reworked, basically.
Oh, the Ottoman Empire falls apart, which right. So, and we talked about this in the Armenian genocide episode, which is that large parts of the Ottoman Empire sort of fell away, including places that we're going to be talking about today. Serbia.
Yes. Okay. So, what ends up emerging from all of this is Yugoslavia as a country, as its own nation. And this was inspired by a concept called Yugoslavism, right? And this was this ideology that had been advocating for the unity of the Balkan Slavs into one state as a means to escape being dominated by what they called the great powers.
Right. So this is what, we can distinguish between sort of 19th century, what I called before we started recording, agglomerative nationalism, as opposed to Wilsonian nationalism, where two people speak a language. That's a nation.
Right.
Right.
And it really does seem like, okay, we have a bunch of tiny areas with smaller nationality groups. And if we want to be in control of our own destiny and not just be turned into client states that are taken over by the great powers over and over and over again, we need to unite together. We're stronger together. Let's go.
Yeah.
So from the jump, Yugoslavia was one country of many different nationalities.
So we've got your Croats,
your
Serbs.
Your Serbs, exactly.
Your Bosnians.
Your Bosnian Muslims, your Slovenes, your Bulgarians.
Yeah.
You got, the Macedonians?
Sure.
You've got the Montenegrins.
Does not Macedonia eventually get its okay?
Yeah. Hungarians, Albanians, Roma.
Yeah.
You get the whole deal. So we got all these little nationalities, and they're like, holy shit, World War I rocked our shit. That was crazy. These countries around us will just go to war with each other all the time. And we, these tiny groups of nationalities, are going to get caught in the crossfire unless we're stronger.
Yeah.
So we should come together, and we should be stronger, and we should create Yugoslavia.
Though I will say, they kind of, a Serbian guy did kind of start the crossfire.
True.
Just
True. But that, sometimes your eyes are bigger than your stomach.
yeah.
Sometimes you're like, I'm ready. And then you're like, oh, that was whoopsie.
Whoopsies.
Yeah, that was way rougher than I thought. So the location of Yugoslavia is also important to note. So first thing you have to remember, one country, lots of different nationalities. And the second thing you have to know is that their location is spiritually lots of different locations. Does this make sense?
Go spirit.
I know.
People have been
Okay.
using the word spiritually to me lately in ways
Mhm.
that feel like I'm gonna say there is slippage.
Okay. Yes.
Right.
Yes, I'm guilty of this right now. Major slippage. So basically, what you have to think of is just as diverse as the people of Yugoslavia were, so was the diversity of the geographical area.
Okay.
This is what I'm getting at here. So the location, the Balkans, is a crossroad between Western Asia, the area we call the Middle East, right, which some people call that West Asia. So if you're, it's hard to figure out the Western Asia that's not called West Asia, and then the West Asia that Europeans and Americans call the Middle East. Both of those, two different things. And also Europe. Okay. So for the geographical framework, I do have a quote from the book I just recommended. This is the only time we're going to reference this book, though, in this episode. So if you want to learn more about the early stages of Yugoslavia, it's a very dense book, but it's very good. So what this author said is few countries of similar size display the diversity of terrain that is to be found in Yugoslavia. Within its borders, several major physiographic regions meet. 50% of the Yugoslav people live in the lowlands of the Sava and the Danube in the northern and northeastern part of the country. These lowland areas, which are an extension of the Pannonian Plains of Central Europe, occupy around 25% of the land area. Most of Yugoslavia, though, is mountainous, but the nature of the mountains varies enormously from place to place. So he goes on to just talk about the difference. You've got Northwest Alps of Slovenia, then you have a Western Alpine system of North Italy, and then there's these Dinaric Alps. Like, basically, what you have to know is a lot of this area is mountains, yes, but there's just a lot of different stuff happening. And when you're hearing about this, the thing you kind of think is like, there's a strong narrative that people build, not necessarily for concrete reasons, but just based on these ideas that Yugoslavia almost does not make sense as one country because of how diverse it is. However, that narrative is heavily politicized.
Right. And so in favor, presumably this also encompasses religious and ethnic differences.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. So you have ethnic differences, geographical differences, national differences, yeah, religious differences. Yes. So when people talk about Yugoslavia, a lot of people try to frame this in this idea that it's improbable that it ever could have been one nation of different people to begin with.
And the idea is like, why don't we partition this up and why don't we balkanize it
Balkanize it,
literally?
where the term comes from, everybody listening at home, yes.
Cut it up into such tiny and insignificant pieces that it can just be a client of the IMF.
Right. And this is exactly it. So there's two kind of things going on. So there's this, I'm going to call it like the story of Yugoslavia, which is that there's so much conflict. None of these people could ever get along. The geography is too diverse. The people are too diverse. They just don't belong together. They don't deserve to be separated. And that's kind of like a narrative about Yugoslavia that you'll hear a lot. And then there is the practical imperialist ambitions over Yugoslavia, which is the wealthy great powers, the very great powers that the people of these regions came together to try to be able to stand up and fight against. They're looking at it like, if we divided and conquered this area, it would be way easier for us to control, export finance capital into, and profit off of.
Absolutely. And I think, right, we were talking as we were walking to the store and back about the fact that it's like, this is not to minimize the fact that there were ethnic national differences that often caused conflict.
Correct. But what we are going to see from the general story of Yugoslavia, the position I'm going to take is the same position a lot of Marxist-Leninists take. You'll see different Marxist positions on Yugoslavia, etc. But the general position I'm going to take is that the same one that applied in the USSR and the same one that applies in China. One of the reasons I'm a Marxist-Leninist is that I think when you have seemingly insurmountable ethnic tension in areas, when you have people of different nationalities, backgrounds, religions, etc., seeming to conflict with each other, Marxist-Leninism provides a framework that not only quells a lot of the disagreements and the fighting, but also gives an opportunity for people to have a sense of self-determination. And I think it does it better than any other system I've seen. So while it's not perfect, you'll see that many places under Marxist-Leninism, they are able to relatively coexist despite these tensions
And
because of the framework.
this is what, like, Parenti somewhere in his book on this says something to the effect of, like, oftentimes, those differences can also best be signified by class difference, right? In ways that, like, creating a society that is more equal in terms of class can often go a long ways,
Yes, like a
right?
lot of the resentments between ethnic groups or nationalities or religions, etc., will be one group is profiting more than the
Yeah.
other. One group is favored, one group is given special treatment. So that is also true. But yeah, I am of the belief that while not perfect, and while in its formation, Yugoslavia did have a lot of different types of people trying to coexist next to each other, and they did get into spats and bickering and fighting. That under a Marxist-Leninist framework, which we will see it later comes into, they did a pretty good job
Yes.
at keeping everything as cool as possible, man, for a long time-ish.
Yeah, it like pulling out the socialism from under Yugoslavia really fucked that
Yeah, it was
country.
pretty bad, yes. Now, that author goes on to talk about the geographical obstacles to unity. And again, this is very ideological how it's framed, but I just want to give you this headset. So he says Yugoslavia physical geography with its varied terrain had created many problems for those who sought to unite the Yugoslav people within a single economic and political unit. The northern lowlands were for centuries part of the Habsburg Empire. The nature of the relief made communications northward into the lands of their Austro-Hungarian masters easier than those southward into the Balkan Peninsula. So you just kind of you get this idea. I'm not going to go into all of them because it is, like I said, pretty pedantic and dry. But the case being made is that there's just geographical features that are also keeping these people from connecting with each other. And that's leading to a lot of tensions. So he says the origins of many of the tensions, which strain the unity of the Yugoslav people today, he wrote this in 1976. But he said they were deeply rooted in the early history of the Balkans. Yugoslavs themselves have a strong sense of history and frequently draw analogies from their colorful past in order to buttress their current attitudes to social and political problems. Each of the national groups can discover a time when its ancestors commanded a much larger territory than that of the present republic. So he goes on and kind of talks about the details of this. He's like, sometimes people within this framework think that, hey, historically, this more of this land was mine.
Yeah.
Or historically, more of this land was mine. But again, what we will see is that Yugoslavia, when it does eventually come to experience socialism, socialism gives people a pretty good way to address those grievances that's absent from other governing systems. So, based on all this information you've heard, it should be no surprise that for hundreds of years, this region was not united. It was very, very divided. The border would shift between the Austro-Hungarians and the Ottoman empires. Large parts of the occupied population adopted the religion and, just like customs, ethnic practices of people who were occupying them because that would give them better social or economic advantages. People were conquering each other. People were subjugated to each other. People were expanding. People were contracting. All of this was kind of this ongoing push and pull relationship.
And so, to be specific, presumably many people adopted Islam under the Ottoman Empire. Many people adopted presumably some form of what Catholicism under Austro-Hungary.
Yeah, there's like
Yeah.
Christianity. I don't know enough about religion though. So division among this land was often thought of as the Slavic people versus the non-Slavic people.
Okay.
So there's a lot of different ethnic groups, but one of the easiest divisions people come to is okay, what some of them are Slavs and some of them aren't. And it's also worth noting the divisions and the differences between them. Most of these things were the products of like conquest, right?
Yeah.
Domination. So that's again the push and pull. So the Slavic nationalities would include the Serbs, the Croats, the Bosnian Muslims, the Slovenes, the Montenegrins, the Macedonians, and the Bulgarians.
Okay.
All right. So then you have the non Slavic nationalities, and those are the Hungarians, Albanians, and Roma. And at this time, when Yugoslavia came together after World War I, and they were like, we are stronger together, we're going to figure this out together, they actually fell under the rule of a Serbian monarchy that was
Okay.
pretty right wing and reactionary and not super great. So they only had semi independence, but they still felt this made them stronger.
Right. So it's like, even if it's a weird ass monarchy, it's better than being like under the thumb either of, I guess, the Ottoman Empire.
Gone.
They're gone.
Yeah.
But like under the thumb of Austro-Hungary, which is, they're kind of,
Yeah. It's like the great powers after World War I were shifting around.
Yeah.
So they had this little brief period of a few years, really, just like 20 years or so, where they're kind of living like this and they're working it out. But then, of course, World War II happens.
And they do super well. Everything rocks. They have a revolution in 41.
Yeah, around there's when it starts.
Yeah,
Pretty fast it starts. So what happens in 1941? Tale as old as time. Nazis versus communists.
the Ustashi,
The Ustashi, yes, the
who
Ustashi.
freaked out even the Nazis.
Yeah, they were pretty hardcore.
Like,
That is true. They did. Sometimes the Nazis were like, "You could cool it. You're pretty out of control here."
this is really bad.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you want to do a little what the Ustashi
The
was? We'll get
Ustashi
into
was
it in more detail.
essentially the Bosnian occupy, or like Bosnian, I don't want to say wing, collaborators with.
They were the collaborators. Exactly.
Okay.
Collaborators is a great word. So March 25th, 1941, Yugoslavia decides to join the Axis. Was it called the Axis of Evil back then?
No,
That was the Axis powers of good.
not,
The Axis of Evil was, what was that? That was George W. Bush?
that was what he called North Korea.
Oh, that's right. Yes, 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 yes. I'm just like buzzwords are floating around my head. I'm like, something was an Axis of Evil, but like they were supposed to be the good guys. I don't get it.
So
Like,
the
what?
Axis powers is like Germany, Italy,
Yeah,
all the
yeah, all the
but
evil. They were
it's
the
in
Axis of
Spain.
Evil still.
Well, yeah, but I don't think I believe that was a George W.
It was George W. Bush calling it the okay.
But no, that was his
But it's a
point.
callback. It was a
like,
reckoning. He was
he
calling
was
it back.
like-
He was bringing it back. He was like, Axis powers. What were they the Axis of then?
I think they were just the Axis.
Are you sure they weren't also an Axis of
Okay,
Evil? We gotta look this up. I think they might have been. Okay, World War II Axis powers. Were they an Axis? Why were they called that?
I mean,
Why called that? Why called
let's
that?
say you're a Nazi, Madeline.
Okay, great. Yes, I'm a Nazi. A Nazi.
Clip that.
Clip it.
Madeline is secretly doing a red brow. No, but presumably, unless you're one of those like occult type Nazis,
Who wants to call yourself the Axis of Evil?
but like you're not gonna be
You're
evil.
right. You're not gonna be like, I'm evil. You're gonna be like, I'm good.
I
Well, I didn't know if they called themselves that or if the United States called. I never thought about this before.
I
Who's
think
out here naming them the Axis and the Allied?
I think they were presumably board game manufacturers.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying.
but-
Was this retroactive? Like, how did this work these times? But I just looked it up, and they were called that after a pact they signed, and they did decide it for themselves, and they did not have any descriptor for what type of Axis it would be.
They were the axis of nude calisthenics. This is two.
Is this real? Did they love? Did the fascists love
Nazis? Oh my god!
calisthenics?
This is
Why do you know this? I don't know this.
Alexia and I got it because this is like it's the Heidegger shit. Of like we want to be like we want to have this like very earthy relationship to land, blood, and soil, and all that stuff. So we're really into calisthenics.
This is the same types of people, by the way, who try to get you guys to buy raw milk.
Mhm.
And they want that relationship to the earth.
Yeah.
This makes sense actually, but yeah, okay, you were right though, because when I was like, well, if they think they're the good guys, they wouldn't go around calling themselves Axis of Evil.
Unless they're like doing like an Indiana Jones thing. Have I told you the Matt story about the? I'm gonna tell it.
Yeah,
because
tell
it's
the
funny.
story. Yeah, yeah.
So a friend of ours who just like you said, whose mother is Jewish, and yada, but
Not
really,
a Nazi, probably.
got really into Indiana Jones when he was in elementary school, and he made the aesthetic choice that bad guys are cooler than good guys, and which is as a thing. And so he in school was asked to do wrapping paper for presents. Like this was a craft project in his elementary school. I think he was in 3rd grade. And he covered a bunch of wrapping paper and swastikas
To represent the bad guys in
who are
Indiana
cool.
Jones.
And I will say there is a point to which is like, if you empty out Nazism of all of it, it's like ideological content
just visually.
as like an aesthetic.
They have a strong aesthetic. That's part of what gets people.
And this is the thing about like the India, like all of the when you put Nazis in movies and then they're just like they just have wackadoo uniforms and like wear monocles and look intense.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
It is very, very interesting. Well,
in any case,
they didn't think they were evil, so they were not calling themselves the Axis of Evil, but they were calling themselves the Axis.
Yes.
Okay, and George W. Bush, I guess, did come up with the Axis of Evil, which I have to say is so catchy, I could not attribute that to him. I would not believe he would come up with that.
I'm gonna say that was probably also like a Rumsfeld or some like
Rumsfeld, I could
fucking
buy that. Yeah, it's got to be a
speechwriter
Rumsfeld
that
thing. Yeah, yeah.
uh
Okay, so March 25th, 1941, Yugoslavia is like, you know what? We'll be evil. We're joining the Axis, pre-Axis of Evil, the first Axis.
we like their uniforms.
Yeah, they look great. We would love to be into your fascist Nazi ethno-state thing.
This is a fabulous opportunity to
Mm.
do mass murder against the Roma people.
Within our borders.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because remember, they had been under the rule of this right-wing reactionary Serbian monarchy. So like, hey, yeah, we'll just do that. Okay, fine. So they said that they were going to let German troops who are on their way to Greece pass through their territory as part of the tripartite act or pact or whatever. And they're like, yeah, yeah, come here. So Prince Paul had been the leader who was pushing hard
I'm
for
sorry,
it.
Prince Paul,
Yeah.
cue hip hop.
Is
He's a rapper.
is he?
There's a Prince Paul rapper.
No. Today on live stream, we watched a lot of propaganda rap videos,
All the
from-
Iran stuff.
but also the Green Party.
Oh, fun.
It was very, very interesting.
You know, I would say as an aside, I saw that Iran did tweet "blood for blood," which just makes me think that they're really into beatdown hardcore.
Oh yeah, I
Which is-
mean
yeah.
they're winning the propaganda war right now.
Yeah.
Majorly. Speaking of aesthetics, so they were like, yeah, we want to be one with you. Prince Paul pushed for it super hard. He won, and then on March 25th, they announced it to the public, and everybody in the rest of the country was like, "Girl, fuck you." Like
Yeah.
Serbia and Montenegro, especially, were like, "Absolutely not. We are not into this weird Nazi shit. No." And 2 days later, Serb military officers overthrew the regency, took a 17-year-old and put him on the throne, King Peter now, and then denounced the previous government's decision to join the Axis and was like, we're not one of you. That was the old management. We're under new management. Absolutely not.
Who the fuck is this King Peter guy?
I don't know. He's some 17-year-old kid.
So they're just like, hang
This
out
is our
there.
guy now. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. So they got a new prime minister, Colonel Dusan Simovic. And within days, he's like, yeah, let's just, we don't want to go upsetting Hitler. Maybe we should just rethink this. Let's go back to the drawing board. And Hitler was like, nah, girl, fuck you. You said what you said. You can't take it back. And on the evening of March 27th, he was like, we're coming for Yugoslavia.
Hitler's like, you know what? We're fighting the Soviet Union. We're fighting the Allied powers.
We're invading Greece.
We like, how many fronts can we do?
Yeah, let's go Yugoslavia. So they attack. So on April 6th, the Nazis start mercilessly bombing Belgrade. And around 11 days later, like the 17th, the Belgrade government surrenders and the Nazis just occupy the country.
Mhm.
Now, this is fast. They fall fast. They were not prepared for this. So it's not just the Nazis, though, who occupy the country. There's the German Nazis, obviously, but there's also the Italian fascists, the Romanian fascists, the Hungarian fascists, and the Bulgarian fascist armies that all come together.
Mhm.
So all the fascists are like, yeah, fuck yeah, we're taking over.
It is
Yugoslavia.
a rainbow coalition of Nazis.
Yes, of different types of Nazis from different places, all doing different types of big bad Nazism. And what happens when liberalism confronts? I guess the king probably wasn't a liberalist. It's probably like a weird feudal thing or some shit, right?
Sure.
Maybe.
I mean,
I'm
like,
not really sure what because they were only a country for 20 years.
okay, let's say what happens when an opportunistic ruling class finds itself
Itself at odds with Nazis. It saves its own ass and it runs away.
Yeah.
It doesn't stick around. It doesn't put up a fight. It doesn't defend shit. So Yugoslavia is largely defenseless, right? So they've got all these fascists hanging around. King Peter flees to London
Well,
through
17.
Alexandria, Egypt. That's kind of true. The prime minister, though, Colonel Dusan Simovic, he takes off too.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm howdy. Everybody just takes off. So the country gets completely broken up and it gets divided into two different zones of control. One under German control and one under Italian control. And then there's some smaller pieces they partition out to some other people. They're like, this never should have been a country. We're breaking it up. Haha, here's ours. Fuck you. So Germany ends up annexing northern and eastern Slovenia. They occupied the Serb Banat, which had, an ethnic German minority in it, but like not insignificant. And then they established a military occupation administration in Serbia proper, with a base in Belgrade.
Mm.
So like, it's ours. So that same month, April 1941, Germany, yeah, is officially militarily occupying Serbia, and it has a police force that's kind of supervised maybe by a puppet Serb government under former Yugoslav General Milan Nedic. So they got some tacit cooperation here. German military and police authorities intern most of the Jews and Roma people, during this time. They put them in detention camps during the summer of 1941. And there's a few different detention camps, basically, that are just across the border in Croatia that they all end up going to. Meanwhile, Italy annexes southern and eastern Slovenia. They occupy the Yugoslav coastline along the Adriatic Sea, which includes the area of Montenegro, and they attach Kosovo Metohija. How do you say it? I've only read that one.
Okay, let's
to Albania. Kosovo
Yeah.
Metohija, yeah, to Albania. And then Italy had already attached or annexed Albania in April
No,
1939.
What I mean, this is remember had been an aspiration. We talked about this in the Biennio Rosso episode, where that one freaky general just got a bunch of Fiat trucks and tried to invade Albania.
Yes, exactly. So some weird shit's been happening all over.
Yeah.
All these stories are connecting together if you've listened to the other episodes. Now, under Ante Pavelic, as Poglavnik, the leader.
Would you like to say? I'm going to take a wild guess, and this is just that it's Pavlik.
Oh yeah,
Pavlik.
That's
a
sounds
guess.
right. No, I think that's correct.
Yeah.
We'll go with that. So the how did you say Eustacia? Eustacia.
Yeah.
So I've seen it also spelled a couple of different ways.
Yeah, I mean,
some people say Eustacia.
There is a kind of when you move from one language to another,
it gets a little messy. Yeah. So the Eustaci, they proclaim an independent state of Croatia, sponsored by the fascists in both Germany and Italy, and then that new independent state of Croatia annexes Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Mm-hmm.
So everything's just getting weird. Germany and Italy then divide Croatia into zones of influence, and they got their own troops stationed there. It's just a whole ass mess. So Croatia would end up being a Nazi state from 1941 to 1945.
Yes.
And lots of people know this.
And they were doing torture stuff that freaked out everyone.
Yeah, Croatia really took to being a Nazi shockingly well. They were like, oh, we're doing Nazi shit?
Yeah.
Okay.
To the point where Nazis were writing in from Berlin being like, dude, guys, chill the fuck out.
Yeah, they're like, it's a little much with the Nazi stuff. I'm not so sure. It was pretty bad. So they volunteered more of their own units to the Nazis than any other nation.
I gotta say, this is, if you've ever been in at a party and someone is everyone's on the same page, but one guy is a little different, and they are always the one that's just I'm going the hardest.
And that was Croatia.
Croatia is the person who's I don't know everyone here as well as you all do, so I have to really prove myself.
Exactly. So when we've talked about Ukraine and under Stepan Bandera, the OUMB collaborating with the Nazis, that was not even as bad as what was going on in Croatia.
No,
that was horrible. They murdered 100,000 ethnic minorities.
Yeah. Full crazy ass torture shit.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Croatia had their Nazi collaborators, the Ustashi. They ran a death camp known as the Auschwitz of the Balkans, and they slaughtered 750,000 Serbs, 45,000 Jews, and 26,000 Roma. Now, you might remember from our Ukraine episode that Ukraine had the highest casualty rates out of any country during the war. However, if you think about this was from the Balkans, and then they were broken up into technically different countries. So that's why these numbers feel higher.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So the country thing is a big defining factor for the number of casualties. That's why. But this is a lot of people from this general region that was only technically coming together as a country for 20 years before it was broken up again. So Hungary then annexed the Bačka and Baranja regions in northeastern Yugoslavia. Bulgaria occupied Macedonia and the tiny Serb province of Pirot. Now, while all of this horrible shit is happening, who do you think is building up the resistance?
Socialists are being partisans, as they are everywhere. In Italy, they're in the mountains, Primo Levi's being Primo Levi, right? It's always... They're socialists being partisans.
Yes.
And they call themselves the
partisans. They call themselves the partisan
with
movement.
A Z, right?
Do they?
Partisans.
Oh, maybe they did. Yeah. I've only seen it written as partisans. But yes, the communist resistance, the partisans, they start building up. And they are calling themselves the People's Liberation Movement. So this is what always happened when their regular business as usual governments would flee from the Nazis. The communists would stay, and they would build up the resistance front. So they were led by Joseph Broz, aka
Tito.
Tito, our
Yep.
guy.
And war heroes tend to do really good things. Like anyone who was a part of the resistance during the war, they end up being kind of
Like the leader of the.
even if they're like some Republican ass motherfucker like De Gaulle.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, yeah. If there's some sort of revolutionary fighting period, a lot of the times people who are good at military action end up kind of having high-ranking government positions. Actually, Castro talked about this when they were talking about Cuba and the revolution, and Castro was like, being good at fighting does not make you good at leading, and we really have to separate these two things out.
Wait, what was the lady who like helped train all the people in the mountains in Cuba?
Oh, I don't know.
I can't remember her name.
Oh, yeah.
She's cool.
Women were very involved in the revolution there, though. Yeah. So Tito is a Croatian Slovenian metal worker, and he is the leader of the Communist Party. But he's not the only leader. They have multi-ethnic leadership, which is a big deal for this region because remember, everybody's like the ethnic tensions, they'll never coexist, blah, 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 blah. So the communists are like, that's bullshit. We can coexist. The most important thing is class, and like we have to come together as regular working class people to defeat the fascists. So other leaders included a Serbian named Aleksandar Rankovic, a Montenegrin named Milovan Djalas, and a Slovenian named Edvard Kardelj. Kardelj.
I think Djalas is the one who ends up going hard anti-communist eventually.
Oh, interesting.
He's the one who wrote that Conversations with Stalin book and then eventually breaks with Tito, moves to the United States and becomes full like anti-communist.
Interesting. Okay, we don't focus much on him for this episode. If he leaves Yugoslavia, it's like that's not really our focus right now.
I mean, that's kind of like he's the one who convinced. We'll get to it.
Okay, so focus on anti-nationalism is really, really strong though because of this. They're like, look, we know our weakness as a group is our nationalist tendencies.
Yeah.
So we have a zero tolerance policy towards nationalism of any kind. Like if you talk about being proud of your people, you're out of here. You can't lead this coalition because that will break us apart. And we need to be super, super united fighting against the Nazis.
Tito is anti-folk festival.
Yes. Tito was like, don't tell me shit about your borscht. We're not fucking having that conversation right now. I don't care what weird clogs you're wearing back at home.
We are going to make one culture that is consumer culture. Yugoslavia does kind of make a like socialist consumer
They do
culture.
Have a market kind of socialism thing, yes, but that's not what Tito's about. Right
no, but like that is what ends up happening.
Yeah, that does happen. David's jumping ahead a little bit. So they're like, together to fight the Nazis, we communists have to just oppose all of the rival nationalities that are happening within Yugoslavia. Like, if you guys are fighting with each other over nationalities, wrong fucking time and place, man. Read the room. We got to unite. So they're like, class solidarity is the most important thing. Any party leader who speaks the name of your nationality, even if you just happen to casually mention it, you're expelled. Because we don't fucking have time for this, and it's just going to lead to some shit.
I mean, that is probably a rough position. This is like if you've ever been asked to like do like an ideological hard line on like rhetoric.
Yeah.
Like it's like all of a sudden you're tripping over yourself every fucking time. Like
yeah. So it was like, don't mention it. You're Serbian. Don't fucking say anything.
That is the. I spent the day taking care of a 3-year-old, saying I was like, don't turn on the stove, please.
And then she was like, I'm gonna turn it on and climb in it because I'm 3.
I will be climbing on the burners while they are like, and I was like, oh boy.
Yeah. You pointed out, and people were like, don't think about the elephant, but you're like, think about it. Yeah, that's exactly what would happen for a lot of people. But it actually worked pretty well for the communists. So Tito was like, look, if you have a stronger nationality like front here, like the Croats and the Serbs, we're actually going to take you down a few notches. You are not as important right now. We're going to elevate smaller and poorer nations that are represented here with their nationalities, the Macedonians, the Bosnian Muslims, and later on the Albanians. So he kind of tried to manage this in order to minimize any sort of ethnic conflict between them as they were fighting the bigger evil. So the Council of National Liberation gets formed, and they are organizing resistance against the Nazis. And this is, communist. It's
Mhm.
not just communist. It's
It,
mostly communist.
it's just like, we don't fucking like these Nazis here. Fuck
Yes.
these
So if
Nazis.
the Communist Party is the party, you can think of the Council of National Liberation as a mass org.
Yeah.
That's, created, kind of run by the party, but not exactly the party. So there were workers, peasants, students, intellectuals, other just regular people from all nationalities in this super, super diverse area. And they were like, nobody's the majority. We're all in this together. The largest numbers, though, in the Council of National Liberation did come from the Serbian population. So the partisan resistance grew into an army of almost 1 million people. It was an
Yeah.
army of 800,000 people, which is pretty good. And that was still in 1941. That's how
Okay.
fast this happened. So in 1941, the armed forces had developed to be a big enough group that they're like, we can actually go take on the Nazis now. So they created brigades to be used in like mobile formations, and they were able to, because of this, kind of orchestrate difficult and complicated tasks in terms of
Mhm.
combat. And they actually got pretty good at fighting the Nazis. The first unit was called the 1st Proletarian Brigade, and that was actually formed by the decision of the Central Committee and Supreme Headquarters on December 22nd, 1941. So it was the end of 1941 is when they were like, let's go. We're
Mhm.
ready to make it happen. So they end up, launching an attack against the Nazis. They're like, we're taking back our land. So by the end of summer of 1942, based in Serbia and Bosnia, initiated by the communist-led partisan movement and by the Serb nationalist Setnek movement of Draza Mihailovic. Mihailovic.
That sounds right.
Okay,
Yeah.
had inflicted serious casualties upon not only the like German military units, but also like the random police personnel that had popped up in all
Mhm.
these new little countries to
So
help carry out the fascist wishes.
they're doing full partisan ass shit where they're like bombing police stations and
Yep.
shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're like, it's war, baby, and we're gonna
Mhm.
take you out. So Hitler was so mad at them that he was like, for every German that dies here, including ethnic Germans in Serbia and the Banat, German authorities are going to kill 100 hostages.
Mhm.
This is him trying to like scare everybody straight, but it doesn't work, right? So German military and police units used this order as a pretext, though, to still shoot like every single male Serb Jew, which was 8,000 people that they had basically.
I'm
been
gonna say
holding.
male Serb or Jew is the and or Jew.
No, it says
Because
Serbian Jews.
I'm trying to go back to your statistics where it was 750,000 dead and how many.
Oh, no, these are the ones that they had
Oh,
as hostages.
oh yes, okay.
Yeah, this was just hostages. Yeah.
Gotcha.
No, this wasn't everybody. So they had hostages. And remember, they were just like, okay, we're just going to shoot them all. So they had 8,000
Yeah.
hostages, basically. So 2,000 additionally,
Mhm.
communists,
Yeah.
real or perceived, were killed. Serb nationalists were killed. Democratic politicians were killed. And 1,000 male Roma were killed as well
Mhm.
during this conflict. So they're not even conflict, really. I mean, I guess it was a conflict, yeah. But it was literally just the Germans being like so pissed off that the communists were fighting back. So the German security police started rounding up Jewish women and children around this time also and incarcerated them in the Semlin detention camp. So now that we have this resistance movement forming, right? This makes me think about something that Stalin always said. So Stalin was like, look, you have a revolution. Great. You won.
Mhm.
You're communist. Good job. But your new revolutionary government can't be the same as your old one. If it's the same as your old government, it's just going to let all the capitalists back in. So you need to build a new one. And it has to be built out of the same apparatuses you used during the revolutionary struggle to oppress the capitalists and the fascists. Right?
Mhm.
So while you're doing a revolutionary struggle, you're going to come up with these systems used to oppress the people who are harming you. And those things are going to be the basis for the new government you form. And this is so true for what the Yugoslavian communists were doing. So the armed fighting is getting more intense in Yugoslavia against the Nazis. The organs of what would become the new people's government, the People's Liberation Committees, come into being.
Mhm.
So they were created to basically figure out ways to get supplies to like the militarized forces, coordinate their actions, and this is where they came from. But they would literally later end up being a government form. So the People's Government would basically represent two main goals of the People's Liberation War, as they called it: liberation from the Nazis and the fascists, yes, but also revolution into a new communist country.
Yeah.
So these were the two goals. So their fight against the Nazis was also their revolution. So Tito in 1942 said, the banner of national liberation war against the forces of occupation raised by the Yugoslav Communist Party in 1941 was also the banner of war for national freedom and for the equality of each nationality within Yugoslavia. It is the same banner that the Communist Party has borne aloft, unsullied since the formation of Yugoslavia, as it fought uncompromisingly so that each one of our nationalities could enjoy national freedom and equality.
Mhm.
So he's like, look, this is also our fight to be able to live without conflict with each other, too, or whatever. So, in October of 1942, the Yugoslav people and the partisans under the Communist Party of Yugoslavia forced 650,000 fascist people who were in the occupying army, the Germans, to begin to retreat. But the Nazis were like, we're not going down easily. Like, we're going to keep fighting. So, in the winter of 1942, the Reich Central Office for Security sent a gas van, which was a truck with a hermetically sealed compartment that served as a gas chamber to Belgrade to intensify the Holocaust there, which I didn't even know they had those
Yeah.
until learning about this. And I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ. Horrible. So 1942, the Nazis are basically doing like their death rattle. Really,
Yeah.
they're losing, but they're like, no, we're gonna fucking just go as crazy as we can with us. And they end up slaughtering so many people throughout this area that for 20 years was Yugoslavia, but now is super, super divided. So Nazi collaborators throughout the area that was Yugoslavia, will be Yugoslavia, etc., included the puppet Netic government that we mentioned earlier in Serbia, but also some bureaucrats in Albania, military and police officials in Bulgaria, some people in Hungary, and the entire basically Croat government establishment, along with the Ustashi, who were like the militia in
Mhm.
Croatia. So they were all working together to deport and murder Jews, Roma people, and communists in Yugoslavia. And I always tell people, remember like the first line of the first they came for the blah blah poem, it's communists. First they came for the communists, because the communists were the people who were organizing everybody to fight against them. So they viewed the communists to be the biggest threat because the communists would potentially overthrow them and stop them. Now, it became pretty obvious to everybody involved that the Axis powers were going to lose the war.
I mean, this is right. Stalingrad happens 42, 43. The U.S. enters the war 41, but Normandy's still like 3 years off.
Yeah, 1945 is when the war officially ends.
But I guess I'm saying, right, like, Nazis are still on the march at this point, right? Like they have not been beaten back.
No,
right?
no. But it kind of becomes obvious that they're going to lose in Yugoslavia.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. So the Yugoslavian royalist forces then start to turn their attention to just murdering communists too. Because they're like, oh, okay, cool. We're fine. We're going to get these Nazis out of here. Well, fuck. Then the communists are going to win the revolution. So then they turn on the communists and they're like, we don't have a common enemy anymore.
Yeah.
Now you're our enemy. So they start trying to kill the communists because they're like, then the communists are going to win and they're going to have a revolution. So over in Serbia, between March and May of 1942, German secret police, or security police rather, they killed around 6,000 people, mostly all Jews, mostly women and children, in the Semlin concentration camp. And by the summer of that year, virtually no Jews remained alive in Serbia unless they had joined the partisans and were fighting, or they were in hiding. So this was a really, really intense manifestation of the Holocaust. Obviously, it was intense everywhere, but just like we say, Ukraine, they got it really, really bad. So did this area that formerly had been and would be again Yugoslavia. So meanwhile, in the independent state of Croatia, remember, they were the ones who were very enthusiastically like, yeah, we'll go fascist now. Yeah. The Ustashi German-backed leadership basically created a reign of terror that was so chaotic and violent and extensive that German and Italian troops ended up having to administer the countryside to enact it.
And this is at the same time that it becomes obvious that fascism in Yugoslavia is not long for this world.
Right. But right. Croatia is like, let's see what we can make happen.
So they're doing like a kind of sallow thing where they're like, fascism is ending, let's go crazy.
Yes. Yeah. This is what everybody kind of did. And it's hard to say, like, maybe they really thought they would win if they just went full psycho mode. But maybe they were like, no, let's just do our bloodlust. Like, let's just, I don't know. So the Ustashi regime murdered or expelled hundreds of thousands of Serbs residing in its territory during this time. In rural areas, the Croatian military and Ustashi militias, basically, they burnt down entire villages of Serbs. They killed the inhabitants, they tortured men, they sexually assaulted women. In all, these Croat authority figures would kill between 320 and 340,000 ethnic Serbs in Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina between 1941 and 1942 alone.
Damn.
which is massive. So by the end of 1941, Croat authorities had incarcerated around 2/3 of the approximately 32,000 Jews of Croatia in camps throughout the country as well. So Ustashi murdered between 12,000 and 20,000 Jews in the Jasenovic system of camps, which are around 60 miles away from the Croat capital of Zagreb. So, in two operations that were in August 1942 and May of 1943, Croatian authorities transferred around 7,000 Jews straight into German custody. The Germans then deported them to Auschwitz. 3,000 Croat Jews did end up evading these deportations. They were usually exempt because they were like married to people who were exempt, or I don't know, they had like connections. They sometimes would manage to flee to an Italian occupied zone in Yugoslavia that was like more forgiving.
Mhm.
But it was pretty brutal. So this Italian zone literally would reject or evade German demands to transfer Jews from these areas. Italian authorities instead would put all of the Jewish refugees in a camp on the island of Rab off the Adriatic coast, which is
Mhm.
interesting. So they were part of the fascist
Yeah.
alignment, but even they were like, this shit's fucking
Yeah.
gnarly, which is pretty interesting to think about, like the different power structures and infighting amongst the fascists about the right way to kill everybody,
Mhm.
as though there was a more ethical way to kill people. Like some people it was like free range slaughter, and some was like we don't care. I mean, it was very very disturbing,
Yeah.
like thinking about it this way. So the Italian authorities removed a few hundred Jewish refugees in the Italian zone and sent them to refugee camps in southern Italy. And after the Italian government surrendered to the Allies in September of 1943, the rapid Ally occupation of southern Italy ended up just freeing them. So after the Italians surrendered, the Germans then occupied the Italian area of Yugoslavia. And Yugoslav partisans would end up actually liberating 3,000 Jews from Rob, from that place, before the Germans could come occupy the land. And they like helped get people to safety so they weren't captured. Croat authorities, though, also on top of this, ended up murdering virtually the entire Roma population of Croatia and Bosnia Herzegovina, at least 25,000 men, women, and children, and between 15 and 20,000 of them were in that same camp system that we talked about. Now, meanwhile, in other areas, Hungarian annexed, and Bulgarian occupied Yugoslavia, as well as Kosovo Metohija, this area, January 1942, the Hungarian military units shot around 3,000 people, 2,500 of which were Serbs and around 600 were Jews, in the northeastern city of Novi Sad, which was supposed to be like in retaliation for an act of sabotage. But Hungary otherwise would not deport any of the
Mhm.
Jewish people there. So the Germans occupied Hungary in March of 1944, and they negotiated with Hungarian authorities to remove the Hungarian Jews. And Hungarian units concentrated there. They took basically like 16,000 Jews into transit facilities to like remove them. So in early June, Hungarian units released the Jews into the custody of the German police, who transported them to Auschwitz, where the majority would die in the gas chambers.
Nice.
So in Macedonia and the Serb province of Pirot, Bulgarian military and police officials basically took the entire Jewish population, put them together, over 7,000 people, and sent them to a transit camp in March of 1943. And Bulgarian authorities transported the Jews to the Serb border, where the Germans then took custody of them and directed them to a killing center in German occupied Poland. So they were basically, the point of this is that they were occupying all these areas, they were dividing it up amongst themselves, and they were basically trafficking all of the people they were trying to ethnically cleanse between each other for different methods of
And
disposal.
this is something I can't remember if we ever talked about this on a previous episode, but in the aftermath of World War II, a lot of the architects of this system were often hidden by the Catholic Church and then transported to South America
Yep.
from the Balkans.
And another thing that would happen too is that the United States would import a select few of them,
Yeah.
and they would form those people's councils of like ethnic minorities in the United States.
And Alan Dulles specifically knew and understood that
Yes.
the Catholic Church was hiding and helping to escape former Nazi collaborators in the Balkans.
Right. And we brought some of them to the United States.
Yeah.
Yes. So none of the Macedonian and Perot Jews that the Bulgarian authorities deported even survived. I mean, it was just really bad. So in Albania and annexed Kosovo, which was under Italian rule, around 400 Jews, most of them native to the area, but also including some refugees who'd come there from Serbia, they were all incarcerated. And in the spring of 1944, the Germans deported between 300 and 400 to Bergen-Belsen, where most of them died. So even as the resistance is growing stronger, trying to fight off the Nazis. The Nazis continue to do horrible things, right? And Nazi allied or adjacent other fascist groups are just doing horrible things in this region. So the People's Liberation Movement gets even stronger as this goes on. And they start directing their activity towards like developing military units and setting up like a whole functioning government to help this stuff run. So it was at this time that what they called the supreme headquarters of the new government published something called the Statute of Proletarian Brigades, on the basis of which there were like proletarian and partisan military brigades consisting of around 800 to 1,000 men each who were capable of fighting. And as they made these, they basically were like, we need to develop more organization, I guess,
Mhm.
around them, more control. So in 1942, they made a whole bunch of these different things all throughout the rest of the country. And these ended up being the main offensive force throughout like the rest of the fighting, but there still were like detachment units of just random partisan groupings here and there. So these new mobile operation units, the ones they called the
Mhm.
brigades, they got bigger and bigger. But then there started to be new problems that arose. Like, how do we command multiple simultaneous operations? Because remember, this area is large. All these operations are happening around the same time. They've got the very, very diverse land that they're dealing with. And it's kind of like this multi front chaotic confusion. So they really had to be super, super organized to figure out where to put all of their efforts. So uh, from here, there's this quote that we're going to read from Colonel Fabian Trigot, who wrote a text survey of the People's Liberation War. And it's a little bit long, but it
Mhm.
really just explains everything. So, in November 1942, the Supreme HQ decided to officially create the People's Liberation Army of Yugoslavia, organized into divisions and corps. The liberation forces were thereby given a new organizational structure, which rendered it possible for them to deliver even harder blows to the enemy. So now we get into some direct quote here. Okay. By the end of 1942, 9 divisions and 2 corps of the People's Liberation Army of Yugoslavia had been set up to carry out operational tasks. Up to that time, the People's Liberation Army had also had a few independent brigades, several dozen partisan detachments, and smaller units, with 150,000 armed fighting men all told. The units of the People's Liberation Army kept pinned down 6 German, 18 Italian, and 5 Bulgarian divisions, units of 3 Hungarian divisions, and a large number of Quisling units. So, just to
Mhm.
intervene here, the reason why we're thinking about this in terms of scale is so you understand that, like, them fighting against the Nazis was them building a government. I just
I
really
see.
want to hammer it home.
Right.
Think
That
about the
it
scale
it
of the
is a
people.
learning experience, or it is a learning experience, but B, the sort of organizational framework that they're going to use post Nazism,
Yes.
post occupation to build their government.
Yes. So think about how many people they're managing, how
Yeah.
they're orchestrating this, how many different fronts they're
Mhm.
fighting. This is how they got their revolutionary government.
And
So
this
it's an
is
untraditional way of a worker revolution coming about.
Well, I mean, this is something that when we did the book club on everyday life and revolutionary, I can't remember the Susie Kim book.
Yes.
Uh,
In North Korea.
that the anti-colonial or anti-imperial movement became the principal basis for like the people's committees
Yep.
during revolutionary Korea.
Yep, and that was during a World War
Right.
II as well. So Korea also had a non-traditional path to
Hmm.
communism. So there were a few places during World War II where, because everybody abandoned the people except for the communists, when the communists stepped up to organize everything,
Well,
um,
even I'm sorry, go
no,
on.
no, just like when they did that, that ended up becoming the basis of their new revolution. So they weren't necessarily fighting a revolution; they were fighting for their survival against these occupying.
I mean, I guess what I was going to say is even in places where that wasn't like where that didn't create a like revolutionary situation, right? Communists tended to come out of World War II in, for example, Italy, massively popular.
Yes,
Same in France, where it's just like, oh, who fought the Nazis?
the
Right?
communists did.
Like,
Yep, exactly. Yeah, this is exactly true. So when you think about these numbers, think about just the massive infrastructure that had to be developed for them to be able to organize us. So the quote continues: the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Yugoslavia paid particular attention to the organizational consolidation of the party in the army and to the strengthening of its leading role. Each unit had its own party cell and branch organization of the Communist Youth League of Yugoslavia,
mhm.
which is major. Communists devoted their energies to fostering discipline and comradeship. They were the first to volunteer for combat tasks, to strive to surmount difficulties and obstacles of all sorts. The party organization in the army was the motive force developing a new type of revolutionary fighting man through ideological, ethical, and political education. Gradually, the truth about the struggle of the Yugoslav people made its way into the world. The position of the treasonous government in exile weakened, the world democratic opinion turning its sympathies towards the People's Liberation Movement as it chalked up one victory after another in its war on the fascist forces of occupation and their lackeys. So that's the whole quote. And I think it sums it up perfectly because it's like, look, these areas, they had the government, they ran away. Little 17-year-old Peter, no, whatever,
Yeah.
he took off. So they're looking at this, the rest of the world, and they're like, wow, the Yugoslav people are they're fighting off the Nazis, they're winning. And a lot of people just came through the course of the battle to see them as the legitimate government of the area. So soon the movement actually set up a more like proper and formal government force, which was a single political body in Yugoslavia, and that became the de facto operating government of the country just right around this time. So on November 26th and 27th of 1942, the Anti-Fascist Council of People's Liberation of Yugoslavia convened with delegates from every region within its borders, representing all of the different countries' nationalities. And we actually have a description of it from the CIA, who was a little freaked out by this.
Okay, sure. Do you have the author of this description? Or is it just CIA?
It's just an internal CIA document. We can probably find the author, though. It's going to be in our notes.
First of all, I'm going to say the CIA does not exist at this point.
Right. It's still OSS. So this is afterwards when they're like forming.
No, this is retrospective.
Yeah, it's retrospective. Okay. And when they're after the war, they're like, what do we fucking do about these people? Yeah. So they talk about this it is past tense, and they say, the Anti-Fascist National Liberation Council of Yugoslavia. The People's Uprising in 1942, the liberation of large areas in the central part of Yugoslavia, the organization of the National Liberation Army, and the transformation of national liberation councils from temporary into permanent organs of authority created the necessary setting for the organization of the AVNOJ. All right, so that's like their organization thing. So since it had become impossible for the Supreme Command to continue directing political, administrative, and economic activities throughout such a large area, the founding assembly of the National Liberation Front was convened, and the AVNOJ was elected as the highest political organ. The resolution on the establishment of the AVNOJ emphasized the following points regarding the past work of national liberation councils. At the beginning of the armed uprising, the National Liberation Councils sprang up in all parts of Yugoslavia, including both liberated and unliberated territories, as the organs of front and rear area unity. As they developed, the National Liberation Councils became organs of the new democratic authority and established themselves as the expression of the united will of the people to throw off the fascist yoke. There was not a single village in the liberated area which did not have a National Liberation Council under the direction of municipality and National Liberation Councils. Numerous National Liberation Councils worked undercover against the hardest conditions to unite and mobilize the people in the battle against the enemy. So what they're saying is these became the highest political organs of the People's Liberation Movements, these councils, right? The main one was the Anti-Fascist Council of People's Liberation, right? Yes. And according to a declassified CIA intelligence, the Communist Party of Yugoslavia formulated its policy accordingly, applying the teachings of Marx and Lenin when the country was occupied. And the native bourgeoisie were committing national treason by directly and indirectly helping the occupation troops. So they reported, and they're like, all right, well, the rich people in Yugoslavia just started helping the troops, and it was just the communists who were doing Marx and Lenin, right, to try to organize us. So they also went on to describe the National Liberation Councils and like how they worked, and it is really, really, really fascinating. So the first central regulations on the National Liberation Councils from this documentation goes back to February 1942 and liberated FOCA, which was the Supreme Command basically creating two documents at the time entitled the Tasks and Organization of National Liberation Councils, and then the explanations and instructions for National Liberation Councils in liberated areas. So basically, once you had an area liberated from the Nazis, they'd go in and establish this new government system now. So here is what the principles were that they developed here. So number one, National Liberation Councils are to exercise all the functions of the people's authority except for those belonging to the military. Number two, the councils are to take measures to activate and organize all of the people in the struggle against the occupation and against domestic traitors. So there's rich people who are siding with them. And again, they're always going to side with fascists over communism every day of the week. Number 3, stipulated measures are to be taken by the councils to supply the National Liberation Army with food and other necessities. Number 4, stress is to be placed on cooperation with the military organs in pursuing spies, saboteurs, traitors, and the like, taking action against thievery and looting, and settling minor disputes among the citizenry and the like. Number 5, special attention is to be given to providing for the welfare of the citizenry and of refugees, administering the economy, and setting up national liberation funds. And number 6, stipulated procedures are to be followed in the election of national liberation councils. Conference or delegates from low-ranking national liberation councils in areas concerned are to elect members of higher-ranking councils. So that's just like your standard Marxist-Leninist delegation system. You vote directly, and then from the people you voted for, they vote for who represents them at the next highest level, up, up, and up, so on. The CIA also noted that these documents pretty immediately granted equal rights to women and gave everybody over the age of 18 the right to vote.
I mean, I to go back to the Alan Dulles understanding, like collaborating with or being well aware and turning a blind eye to the Nazi thing.
Yep.
I just want to point this out. In the CIA's own documents, they are describing an anti-Nazi liberation movement that is well organized and gives a lot of rights, while then OSS operatives are going, yeah, but like maybe what if some of them went to like Argentina and just like got a bunch of money potentially from the US government?
Yeah.
Just throwing this out there that the US at the same time that like all of our grandpas or whatever were fighting Nazis, parts of the US state were already going like, yeah, but like what about the Nazis?
Right. Yeah. They were
Just
already
throw
like, the communists sound way like more of a threat.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So this developed into more permanent structures, according to the CIA, as well. And this involves Tito, too. So this is the development of the National Liberation Councils from temporary into permanent organs. And they say by mid-1942, after the Supreme Command and most of the National Liberation Army had arrived in Bosanka, Krajina, and had coordinating the uprising in Bosnia, Lika, Kordun, and Dalmatia, the liberated territory stretched from Glina to Podgora. The People's Authority was firmly organized in this area, and the temporary administrative section of the Supreme Command directed the organization and the work of the People's Authority until the AVNOJ, that was the abbreviation, like we said, for the Anti-Fascist National Liberation Council of Yugoslavia, was established. In addition, there were 3 areas which were not directly connected with the Central Liberated Territory. Those were Zumbarak, Papuk, and the Krundija areas in Slovenia. These areas included 34 some unit of measurement that's not super applicable to us, but they each had their own national liberation councils, these territories. And each area had a command headquarters. And in September of 1942, the Supreme Command issued a decree on elections of national liberation councils and the decree on organizing rear area militia authorities. So these decrees got published in a brochure. And along with the brochure, Tito wrote a letter, which represented a major turning point in the organization and development of the People's Authority. So Tito's letter basically emphasized the following things. Number 1, the National Liberation Councils and the military authorities were to remain organs of the People's Authority. Like, that's your government now. Number 2, the character of the National Liberation Councils is to be changed, but they are going to continue to serve as transitional organs, right? So they're going to take us out of war and into our actual stable government. Number 3, the transitional character of the National Liberation Councils is to be only another phase in their development towards a higher phase. And number 4, the former forms of authority are finished. For the National Liberation Councils are the seed from which the future government is to be developed. So, just like Stalin said. Now, October 20th, 1944, the People's Liberation Army and units of the advancing Soviet Red Army officially liberate Belgrade, the capital of Serbia. The Germans lose 25,000 men killed or captured. Several thousand citizens of Belgrade take part in the fighting to free their city. Thousands of new men join the Liberation Army. And Belgrade becomes the political and military hub of the new Yugoslavia. And the People's Liberation Movement, basically its government.
Oh, I'm just going to throw another callback. Remember how a certain gay spy,
Ken Philby?
Actually, you know what? I really do not want to do bisexual erasure here.
Bisexual
spy.
Yes.
Was at this point informing like the Soviet and presumably Tito's government, like, hey man, we keep parachuting a bunch of like weird fascists into your country. Just throwing this out there that like
that's so funny.
That was also like just a little throwback.
That's very interesting, actually. Yeah. So elections start to get held for the new governments in every liberated area that happens. They liberated area, they set up, the People's Liberation Army sets up one of these councils, and then they're like, you need to have now an election. So 1945, World War II ends, right? And the People's Federative Republic of Yugoslavia, which would later be renamed the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, officially gets formed. But remember, they might have come together to fight the Nazis, but they are still ethnically and nationally very diverse.
Yeah.
So it's comprised of 6 different republics and 2 autonomous regions, marked with over 20 different ethnicities and religious minorities.
Mm-hmm.
The 6 republics are Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia Herzegovina, Montenegro, Macedonia, and Serbia.
Mm-hmm.
And the 2 autonomous regions both are within the Serbian Republic, and they are Vojvodina, which is a large Hungarian-speaking minority, and Kosovo-Metohija, with an ethnic Albanian majority.
And even Parenti makes the point that the autonomous regions become a kind of thorn in Tito's side.
Yes. So this is as far as I think we're going to get today. It might be like a short episode for us for
where
usual.
Are we at?
I think we might be, well, we recorded in 2 parts, so we might be at around an hour, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Because I think this is a good stopping point, and I think we're going to be able to get into the Yugoslavia that people think of when they think of Yugoslavia today is really starting from this moment. It's not the 20 years before the war. It's not that period. And so I really want to give proper focus to like building the idea of Yugoslavia, like as it develops.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything you think is like pertinent to discuss regarding Yugoslavia? Because the main thing I take from this is that the United States, we will find, surprising to nobody, really does its best to stoke these ethnic tensions in the area, to do a divide and conquer strategy that we see them do all over the planet, in Vietnam, in Korea. They're trying to do it in China now, throughout the USSR. And it is interesting because we could see that these people did come together to fight a much greater evil, and they could coexist.
Yeah.
Which is, when you read Michael Parenti's book on this, To Kill a Nation, that is, or is it Killing a Nation?
I think it's something like that. To Kill a Mockingbird.
The sources will be listed in the episode notes, as always. But Parenti's book, he really tries to make this case. And this is something I think that is the most sane and rational case to make about all these different ethnic groups coexisting in Yugoslavia, is that whatever you think about it, Marxist-Leninism does provide a framework to facilitate cohabitation.
Sure.
Amongst people that otherwise might want to kill each other.
Right. Like, it also, I suppose we will get into this next week or whatever, but one thing that, like, I would like to put a pin in is that Tito's eventual differentiation of Yugoslavia from the Soviet bloc bears, let's say, mixed fruit.
Yes.
Right. Like,
that is true. That is true. We're going to have a split going on here.
On the one hand, and I like, this is just in anticipation of next week.
Yep.
Right. On the one hand, it, like, there are important ideological reasons why, or ideological and pragmatic reasons why Tito splits from the Soviet Union, that I think are, in a certain sense, rational and well motivated.
Yes.
On the other hand, that means that Yugoslavia eventually becomes subject to certain financial institutions in the West that fuck the country royally.
Yes. So what we're going to get into next week is how Yugoslavia develops as a socialist place that does a pretty good job of managing all these different ethnic differences, and develops from there into a place that, yes, gets basically abandoned by the socialist bloc, has to make a series of compromises in order to ensure its survival.
Yes, and like industrial expansion.
And ultimately gets pulled apart by the USA and balkanized, turned into many smaller regions instead of one more powerful thing in the end of it.
In the meantime, one of the things that I came across several times in descriptions of Yugoslavia's sort of, let's call it, golden age.
Yes.
Was a country that was undeniably, like, rich in cultural institutions that produced like the word utopia was used several times to describe, like, the kind of Yugoslavian socialist culture
Mhm.
that seems, I don't know. Did you come across that as a
I didn't come across it very much, but, like, I do there was a period there was a golden era for
yeah.
Yugoslavia. Things were going well for a while, and it was much more positive than what had been happening there before, but you also have to remember what had been happening there before was horrible.
Yeah.
So it was you're getting taken over by Nazis, you're getting torn
Mhm.
apart, you're getting divided. You weren't divided before that. And World War I and World War II were horrible for everybody,
Mhm.
right? It was difficult for everybody, but especially for these people who had not been able to really stand together to be a united front in World War
Mhm.
One. And by the time they did come together in World War II and they had some success as communists, which meant that they exited World War II with an immediate target on their back.
Yeah. All right.
There it is. So
Well, here we
that's the
are.
first week of Yugoslavia. If you are part of our Patreon, I'm going to put up a 30-minute video to that you might like.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's not mine. It's an Answer Coalition video. It's an anti-war group talking about the eventual conflict that would come about in Yugoslavia between Yugoslavia and NATO. And I think it's a good watch. So I'm just going
Mhm.
to pop it up for you so you can get a little bit primed on it. You can see what's going on. And that's going to be over there. And if you're not on our Patreon, it's patreon.com/pick me up I'm scared. It's $3 a month and you can get access to bonus stuff. And we're going to do some bonus content um, about Yugoslavia as well in the upcoming weeks. I think this will only be a 2-part episode.
Yeah, okay.
I think
Cool.
it will be. I think it will be.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so that's it. So check us out over there, $3 a month. We appreciate your support, and we will be back next week with part 2.
Perfect.